Friends, hello. Ruslan Bailov here, and today we begin with the hottest point, the Zaporizhzhia direction, where over the past 24 hours, events have occurred that are capable of changing the balance of forces across the entire southern front. If you compare today's map with what it looked like just a day ago, the difference is obvious. The Russian army has advanced on several sectors at once, and now a front that until recently was considered stalled has literally come to life. The situation has changed especially dramatically in the areas of the Uspyanovka and Poltavka fortified districts, two powerful strongpoints of Ukrainian defense. Cartographers have made dozens of adjustments in a single day. Some are based on visual confirmations, others on radio interceptions and satellite imagery. But the fact remains, the line of contact has shifted and a breach has opened between Uspyanovka and Poltavka, where Russian units are pushing in. The Ukrainian side held this sector with great difficulty, and now the situation there looks increasingly critical. According to an official statement from the Russian Ministry of Defense, the settlement of Novovasilivska has been completely cleared. Footage published by the Vostok grouping serves as confirmation. In it you can see the entire operation, from airstrikes to street clearance. First, Russian aviation literally smashed the fortified area with several series of FAB bombs. Then artillery came into play, tube artillery, multiple rocket launchers and mortars. After that, FPV drones struck individual positions and Ukrainian equipment. Only then did assault detachments enter the settlement. As a result, the village came under full control of Russian forces. It may seem like a small episode, but its significance is hard to overestimate. Novovasilivska is located east of the Yanchul River, and it now effectively serves as a bridgehead for forcing the water obstacle. The next stage is considerably more difficult, to secure positions on the opposite bank, in the southern or central part of Uspyanovka, where the main Ukrainian lines run. We are talking about populated places such as Novo-Nikolaivka and Pavlivka. It is important to understand that holding these lines for Kiev is a question of survival for the entire front line in this sector. If Russian forces manage to consolidate beyond the river, the defense of the Uspyanovka fortified district will collapse, and with it, the whole southern arc of Ukrainian positions. Just yesterday, a number of pro-Russian analysts noted that the forcing of the Yanchul had already begun in the Poltavka area. Today, this is being confirmed more and more often. Local sources report the appearance of Russian units in the center of the village. That means pressure is increasing, and the Vostok grouping is methodically carrying out its assigned tasks. Meanwhile, nearby to the north, reports are coming in that Russian forces have consolidated in Novohrihorivka. Even Ukrainian mapping services recognize that this settlement is already in the grey zone. Formally, no one controls it, but in fact the Ukrainian armed forces have left it. Further north, in the Alexeyevka area, the Ukrainian side launched several counterattacks, but ran into massive return fire. The published footage shows how multiple rocket launcher systems cover the entire perimeter of the village. It later turned out that this was not just an artillery strike, but a full preparation ahead of a Russian assault. Even pro-Ukrainian maps now mark a new grey zone from Verbov to the southern outskirts of Alexeyevka. Apparently forward assault groups have entered there, and clearing operations are now underway. Why is Alexeyevka drawing so much attention? It's simple. This settlement controls supply routes between Pokrovsk, Veliko-Mikhailivska, and the Zaporizhzhia front line. Losing Alexeyevka would automatically deprive the Ukrainian army of the ability to rapidly redeploy forces to the south. For the Russian side, this means one thing: control over all possible bridges and crossings through which the Ukrainian armed forces bring reinforcements. If the Ukrainians lose Alexeyevka, their supply lines will be narrowed to a single road, the R85 highway. That road runs through Danilivka and Vyshnev, but fierce clashes are already taking place there too. Fighting near Vyshnev has been going on for several days, and if the Russian army secures it permanently, the entire logistics of southern Ukraine will be jeopardized. In fact, with the loss of the Uspyanovka and Poltavka fortified districts, Russia will have an open route to Huliaipol and further to Orikhiv. This is not just movement on a map. It is a change in the balance of forces across the entire southern direction. Kiev is now forced to urgently rush reserves there, pulling units even from around Pokrovsk. And that, in turn, creates new weak points in the center of the front. In practice, it becomes a chain reaction. Pressure intensifies in one sector, neighboring sectors crumble, and if the situation in Zaporizhzhia continues to develop at the same pace, in a week or two we could see a completely new configuration of the front line. That is why today's news from this direction has strategic significance. This is not a local success, but a sign that the southern front is ceasing to be static. Russia has again taken the initiative into its own hands. Now we move to the center of the Donbass front, the Pokrovsk area. This is where a battle is underway that may become one of the most significant in the entire campaign. For several days in a row, the map there has been changing literally every 24 hours, and the tempo of the Russian advance has not yet slowed. I remind you that the general offensive began on October 2nd, and since then the front in this area has become the main focus of forces. For 5 days, Russian units have been methodically advancing in the western, southwestern, and southeastern parts of the agglomeration. Confirmations are now coming one after another. The western quarters of Pokrovsk are practically cleared, and the front has reached the boundaries of the railway line. According to military sources, the Russian army controls the area from Kotlino to the industrial zone located north of the railway. Clearing operations are proceeding house by house, in basements, and against fortified points. In the central and western parts of the city, engineering units are already working to clear streets and warehouses of mines. Ukrainian resistance in this sector has been broken, but the main point is this. Today it was confirmed that Russian troops have crossed the railway that divided Pokrovsk into two parts and entered the industrial district in the northwest of the city. And here is where things get really interesting. This district is the nerve center of the entire defense of Pokrovsk. If it is taken, the whole Ukrainian grouping in the agglomeration will be at risk of encirclement. Analysts report that the Russian army is advancing along three main axes. The first, from the west, through residential areas and the industrial zone, aiming to reach the M30 highway and cut off channels for the delivery of ammunition and personnel. The second, from the east, along Mazepa Street, where the main logistical artery of Ukrainian forces ran. The third, central, where clearing of warehouses and workshop facilities is taking place. If this district falls, the Ukrainian army will be forced to withdraw to the southeast and abandon a significant part of the city. In practice, this will be the beginning of an operational encirclement of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. And if Russian units push a few more kilometers westward, the situation could turn into a full-scale cauldron. Ukrainian forces stationed in Pokrovsk, Rovno, and Mirnohrad would be cut off from supply and avenues of retreat. This is no longer the tactic of creeping pressure. It is the execution of a deep operational plan. Russian command is systematically squeezing the enemy out of key Donbass towns, creating a chain of local pockets. Against this background, Ukrainian sources try to hold the morale line with reports of counterattacks, but battle footage shows something else entirely: destroyed equipment, demolished positions, and panic on radio channels. Now let us turn to the breakthrough area. Here, Russian units have also improved their positions and shifted into active offensive in the districts of Vladimirovka, Pankivka, and Novotoretsk. This is where the largest concentration of heavy equipment is deployed, equipment that was practically unused in previous months. The Ukrainian side published footage of strikes on Russian columns, but careful observers immediately noticed the equipment is moving in good order, under the cover of drones and aviation. That means the situation here is stabilized, and Russia can operate under conditions of operational control. In fact, new tank breakthroughs have begun. The goal is to breach the defensive lines in the Shakovo and Vladimirovka areas, where remnants of Ukrainian fortified districts still remain. In practice, this looks like a step-by-step squeezing of the enemy from strongpoints, under the cover of artillery fire and airstrikes. Ukrainian counterattacks are proving meaningless. The equipment they bring into battle is destroyed literally minutes after moving out from behind the villages. This is clearly visible in footage from objective control. Sharp, direct, without embellishment. Analysts are already calling this area a turning point. If Russian forces manage to consolidate in Vladimirovka and move on to clearing the Kharkov pocket, it will mean that the entire front between Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka is effectively broken. The road to the north will be open. The enemy is trying to hold on using reserves pulled from Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, but they are not enough. Even Ukrainian analytical channels are beginning to admit that maneuvering options have been exhausted. Mobilized troops are being pushed to the front, and their level of equipment and coordination leaves much to be desired. Looking at the bigger picture, the Pokrovsk direction and the breakthrough zone are becoming the new center of operational offensive. These are no longer local fights for villages. This is a systematic forward movement that could eventually cause the collapse of Ukraine's entire central defensive line in the Donbass. Now we move north, toward the Kostiantynivka direction. This sector had long remained in the shadows. Many had already come to think that after the heavy battles in August and September, the front here had frozen. But the past 2 days have shown that the silence was deceptive. The Russian army has resumed its advance, and with a clear intention, not just to probe the defense, but to shift its main line of resistance. The first map updates appeared yesterday, and today there are already confirmations from the areas of Klebenbyk and Yablunivka. According to field reports, several Ukrainian strongpoints near the reservoir have been taken, and the settlement of Klebenbyk itself has reportedly come under Russian control. Video footage has appeared showing assault groups advancing along the riverbank, suppressing firing positions. These clips have not yet appeared in official reports, but everything already points to a large-scale offensive development. The main goal is to reach the outskirts of Kostiantynivka and create a bridgehead for a potential assault. If this bridgehead can be held, the entire defensive system of the Ukrainian armed forces in the southwest will collapse. That would mean the entire Kostiantynivka urban area, tens of square kilometers of development, will come under attack, and from several directions at once. The advance is progressing through Pleshiivka and Ivanpol, and further south through Berostok. Each day pressure increases on Ukrainian positions all along the front, from the reservoir to the city itself. An interesting detail is that this very direction had long been considered under an operational pause. Many experts believed that Russia would focus on Pokrovsk and the south. But now we see the opposite. The strike came where it was least expected. The element of surprise has played its role. Ukrainian sources are being forced to admit the units stationed in the Klebenbyk area had to withdraw. At the same time, counterattacks they tried to launch near Ivanpol led to nothing. Footage from objective control shows Ukrainian armored vehicles being destroyed on the approaches. It appears that in the coming days we will see a new front line, closer to the outskirts of Kostiantynivka itself. And now further north. The Siversk direction remains one of the most intense. Despite the absence of large breakthroughs, combat activity does not subside for a single day. South of Siversk, in the areas of Kuzminivka and Zvanivka, Russian artillery is working practically around the clock. The main task is to exhaust Ukrainian units and deprive them of the ability to form reserves for other sectors. A positional struggle is taking place here, but each day brings small shifts forward. Kyiv is facing growing problems with troop rotation. There simply are not enough people. Reports are emerging that on some sectors, positions are being held by untrained mobilized soldiers who have reached the front for the first time. This is always a sign of increasing exhaustion. A similar situation is developing on the Lyman sector. Progress is reported in the areas of Zarikny and Stavky. According to military sources, Russian units have managed to encircle the settlement of Novoselivka from two sides, effectively creating an operational encirclement. If this information is confirmed, the next stage will be the clearing of Drobyshev and advancing to the outskirts of Lyman. Here again, the same logic is visible as in the south. Strikes are delivered on seemingly secondary directions, but as a result, conditions are created for the collapse of the entire defensive system. The concentration of Ukrainian forces around Zaporizhzhia and Pokrovsk forced Kyiv to pull units from the north, and now gaps have appeared there. Russia is exploiting them as quickly as possible. Comparing the situation along the front as a whole, it is clear that the initiative is shifting to the Russian army. The pace of combat is increasing, and the geography of strikes is expanding. Quite literally, yesterday the front was static, today it is moving. Each new day brings map changes, and more often those changes favor Russia. If we analyze everything in total, Zaporizhzhia, Pokrovsk, Kostiantynivka, Siversk, and Lyman, one conclusion emerges. The conflict is shifting from local battles to a systemic operation. Kyiv has less and less room to maneuver, and the so-called reserves it announces are, in reality, overstretched and poorly prepared. For Russia, however, this is a moment of confidence. After a long period of defensive warfare, it has moved to the offensive, and now holds the initiative. If the current army tempo continues, the winter of 2025 could become a turning point in the campaign. Both Kyiv and the West are already acknowledging this. But the most important factor is morale. Each successful assault, each captured settlement, each disruption of railway supplies hits the Ukrainian rear far harder than any missile. The country is entering winter amid growing exhaustion and an ever-deepening dependence on the West. And the West, as we can see, is no longer in great shape itself. That is why the coming weeks will be decisive. If the initiative is maintained, by spring the map of hostilities will look completely different. We are entering a new phase of the conflict, where not only the strength of arms matters, but also endurance, organization, and patience. That concludes today's review. Thank you to everyone who watches, supports, and follows the events. This has been Ruslan Baylov. Take care of yourselves and see you in the next episode.